After selling my company for $32 million, I threw a party. Just before the toast, I saw my daughter-in-law put something in my wine. When no one was looking, I quietly swapped glasses with her father. A few minutes later, he started. Dennis's fist crashed onto the mahogany desk, making the signed contracts jump. I flinched. $5 million, that's what I need, and I need it now. I looked up from the documents spread before me, my hand still gripping the pen I'd used to sign away 32 years of my life's work. The ink was barely dry on the sale agreement. $32 million. Freedom. Retirement. A new chapter. Dennis, I just sold the company. I can finally retire, and that's perfect, I said. Perfect, Mom. His eyes gleamed with something I'd never seen before. Greed, raw, undisguised hunger. Now you can help your son. $5 million. I've got debts to cover, and I want to start my own business. Wendy stood by the door, her calculating gaze shifting between Dennis and the contracts on my desk. She nodded slightly when Dennis glanced her way, a silent signal I almost missed. You didn't even congratulate me. The words came out harder than I intended. This is the biggest day of my life, and you march into my office demanding money. I'm congratulating you now. Dennis leaned forward, his palms flat on the desk. $32 million is incredible. So what's $5 million to you? It's nothing. Nothing. I had started King Technologies in this very room when Dennis was barely walking, worked 18-hour days, missed school plays and baseball games, built something from scratch while raising him alone after Ray died. Dennis, you have no idea what this money represents. I gathered the contracts protectively. This is my security, my retirement. I've earned this. And I'm your son. His voice cracked like a teenager's, though he was 38 years old. I deserved something for all those years you were working instead of being a mother. The accusation hit like cold water. Wendy stepped closer, her voice honey-sweet. Maybe we could discuss this more calmly. Dennis just thinks it would be wonderful if you could help us get started. Started? I almost laughed. Dennis had been getting started for 15 years. Different jobs, different schemes, always needing money. And since marrying Wendy 3 years ago, those needs had grown exponentially. Come to the party tomorrow night. I stood, tucking the contracts into my desk drawer. Bring Wendy's parents. We'll celebrate properly. I'll explain my plans for retirement. Maybe discuss how I can help you both responsibly. Responsibly? Dennis's laugh was bitter. You mean like a loan with terms and interest? I mean like family who cares about each other's future. Wendy whispered something in Dennis's ear. His face hardened. If you don't help us now, don't expect us at your party, and don't expect us for Sunday dinners or holidays either. The threat hung in the air like smoke. I watched my son transform into someone I barely recognized. Gone was the boy who used to sit on my lap during late-night work sessions, asking about business and dreaming of joining the company someday. That would be your choice, not mine. I kept my voice steady. The party starts at 7. Your decision. Dennis turned toward the door, then spun back. His fist slammed the desk again, harder this time. A coffee mug jumped and spilled across quarterly reports. You're making a mistake, old woman. We're your family. We deserve that money more than some savings account. Wendy placed her hand on his arm, but her eyes never left mine. Come on, honey. Let's give your mother time to think about what really matters. They walked out together. Dennis's shoulders rigid with anger, Wendy's heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I heard their voices in the hallway, sharp and urgent. Wendy's words were too quiet to catch, but her tone was clear. Planning mode. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Through my office blinds, I watched Dennis rev his BMW unnecessarily loud before peeling out of the driveway. Wendy sat in the passenger seat, her phone already pressed to her ear. I sank back into my chair, staring at the coffee stains spreading across financial projections I'd never need again. 30 years of building something meaningful, and my own son saw it as nothing more than a lottery ticket with his name on it. The contracts felt heavier when I pulled them out again. $32 million. More money than I'd ever dreamed of as a young mother working in this cramped home office. Dennis sleeping upstairs in his race car bed. Where had I gone wrong? When had my son learned to see family as leverage instead of love? The coffee stain had soaked through 3 layers of reports by the time I stopped staring at it. My hands trembled slightly as I moved the documents to dry ground. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the lawn, where Dennis used to play catch with his grandfather. When did he become so entitled, so calculating? I remembered Dennis at 8 years old, proudly carrying my briefcase from the car to the office. "Mom, when I grow up, I want to help you run the company." His gap-toothed smile had made every 18-hour day worth it. That boy would have cheered about the sale, would have asked thoughtful questions about my retirement plans, would have hugged me before anything else. The phone rang. Jim Patterson, my oldest friend and business rival for 30 years. "Bertha, I heard the news through the grapevine. 32 million, you magnificent devil." Jim's laughter filled the office. "I suppose you're having a celebration tomorrow night at 7? Can you and Martha make it?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world. This calls for champagne. Real champagne." After hanging up, I felt slightly steadier. Real friends understood the significance of this moment. They'd watched me build King Technologies from nothing, survive the lean years, celebrated every milestone. The catering company answered on the second ring. "Elegant Events. This is Susan." "This is Bertha King. I need everything perfect for tomorrow night's party. 50 guests, cocktails, and dinner. Money is no object." "Wonderful, Mrs. King. We've handled several of your corporate events. Should we prepare for any dietary restrictions?" "Just make sure there's plenty of everything. This is the most important celebration of my life." After confirming details with Susan, I called my attorney's office. The sale would take 30 days to finalize completely, but the contracts were ironclad. By Halloween, I'd be officially retired and wealthier than I ever imagined. The house felt different without Dennis's angry energy poisoning the air. Quieter, more like the home I'd loved for 25 years. I walked to the kitchen and opened a bottle of wine. Nothing fancy, just something to mark the moment properly. My phone buzzed. "Dennis." I let it ring. 2 more calls followed in quick succession, then a text. "Mom, we need to talk. This is important." Important to whom? Everything had always been important to Dennis when money was involved. His credit card bills, his car payments, his investment schemes that never panned out. But my achievements, my dreams, those had never seemed urgent enough for his attention. The wine tasted better than expensive champagne. I'd earned every sip through decades of careful decisions and calculated risks. Dennis wanted to waltz in and claim a windfall he'd played no part in creating. Another text arrived. "Wendy's parents want to meet you before the party. Can we come by around 6 o'clock tomorrow?" I stared at the message for a long time. Homer and Mai Thompson, retired teacher and homemaker from Wisconsin. I'd met them twice, both times briefly. Pleasant people, if a bit overwhelmed by their daughter's ambitions. Did they know about Dennis's demand? Were they part of whatever strategy Wendy was orchestrating? My reflection stared back from the kitchen window, looking older than I felt. 65 years old, finally successful enough to enjoy life, and my only child saw me as an ATM machine. The wine bottle was half empty when I made my decision. Tomorrow's party would happen exactly as planned. Friends who genuinely cared about my success would celebrate with me. If Dennis chose to stay away, that would reveal everything I needed to know about his priorities. I turned off the kitchen lights and headed upstairs. In my bedroom, I pulled out the guest list I'd been working on all week. 28 confirmed attendees so far. People who'd supported King Technologies through good times and bad. People who understood what 30 years of dedication actually meant. Dennis's name wasn't on that list. I hadn't added it because I'd assumed family would come automatically. Maybe it was time to stop assuming anything about my son. The family photo felt heavier than it should have when I lifted it from the mantel. Dennis at age 10, gap-toothed grin stretching from ear to ear, standing beside me at the King Technologies ribbon-cutting ceremony for our first real office building. His small hand gripped my larger one with absolute trust, hero worship shining in his eyes. I settled into my leather armchair, studying that innocent face. When had admiration curdled into entitlement? When had Wendy, not entirely fair, perhaps? Dennis had shown signs of restlessness before meeting her. The job hopping, the get-rich-quick schemes, the gradual distancing from family traditions. But Wendy had crystallized those tendencies into sharp-edged ambition. I remembered their wedding 3 years ago. Dennis had been nervous, but genuinely happy. Wendy, stunning in white silk, had seemed perfect for him. Smart, articulate, ambitious. During the reception, she'd approached me with a champagne flute and a calculating smile. "I hope you know how lucky you are to have Dennis," she'd said. "He's going to accomplish amazing things with the right support." The right support. Code for money. I realize now. Within 6 months of marriage, Dennis's financial requests had doubled. Better apartment, newer car, investment opportunities that always seemed to require immediate cash infusions. Wendy's influence wrapped around him like expensive perfume, intoxicating and impossible to ignore. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered without checking the caller ID. "Mom?" Dennis's voice carried none of today's aggressive edge. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot earlier." "Maybe." "I was excited about your success. Sometimes I express things poorly." A pause. "Wendy thinks we should all sit down tomorrow before the party. Her parents are driving in specifically to meet you properly." Wendy thinks, not Dennis thinks. The distinction mattered. "The Thompsons are welcome tomorrow night," I said carefully, along with everyone else celebrating this milestone. "But Mom, we really need to discuss the financial situation privately first. As a family." Financial situation. As if my retirement planning was somehow your emergency. I breathed slowly. "Dennis, I'm not discussing money with you again until you demonstrate some basic respect for what I've accomplished. Congratulations would be a good start." "I did congratulate you." "No, you demanded payment. Very different things." Silence stretched between us. Finally, Dennis sighed. "Fine. Congratulations on selling the company, Mom. I'm proud of what you built." The words sounded rehearsed, probably coached by Wendy, but I heard something genuine underneath. Maybe a trace of the boy who used to bring me crayon drawings of office buildings. "Thank you. That means more than you know." I softened my tone slightly. "The party starts at 7 o'clock. Cocktails in the living room. Dinner at 8 a.m. Dress nicely. This is important to me." "We'll be there." Another pause. "Mom, I really am sorry about earlier. The money talk. That wasn't how I meant to handle things." After hanging up, I felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe Dennis could separate himself from Wendy's influence long enough to celebrate appropriately. Maybe family bonds could overcome financial greed. I walked to the kitchen and checked my party preparations. Susan from Elegant Events had confirmed everything. Bartender, servers, chef, even flowers for the tables. 47 people had now confirmed attendance, more than I'd expected. The wine cellar yielded treasures I'd been saving for special occasions, a 1982 Bordeaux from the year I incorporated King Technologies. Champagne from France, not the domestic stuff. Tonight called for the finest everything. In my study, I arranged the sale contracts in a leather portfolio. Some guests would want to see the actual documents, understand the scope of what I'd achieved. $32 million represented more than money. It was validation of every risk taken, every sacrifice made. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times. Soon, I'd need to rest, prepare for tomorrow's celebration. But first, I wanted to savor this moment of quiet accomplishment. Outside my window, the neighborhood settled into evening routines. Porch lights flickered on. Television screens glowed behind curtains. Normal families living normal lives, probably never dreaming of the kind of success I'd achieved. Yet here I sat alone with my triumph, wondering why victory felt hollow when my only child saw it as opportunity rather than achievement. Tomorrow would tell the story. Either Dennis would remember how to be my son, or I'd finally understand that some relationships couldn't be forced. The contracts felt warm under my fingertips as I closed the portfolio. 32 million. Freedom, independence, the power to choose who deserved my generosity and who had already revealed their true nature. For the first time all day, I smiled without reservation. The alarm jolted me awake at 8 sharp. Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through bedroom curtains, promising perfect weather for tonight's celebration. My first thought wasn't about Dennis's apology call. It was about the 47 confirmed guests who deserved an unforgettable evening. Coffee brewing. I spread my handwritten checklist across the kitchen table. Flowers from Millfield Gardens. Wine selection from Romano's Fine Spirits. Fresh oysters and imported cheeses from Dell'Acqua Delicatessen. Everything had to be perfect. The morning air felt crisp against my face as I drove toward downtown. First stop, Romano's, where Vincent himself greeted me at the door. "Mrs. King, I heard about your big sale. Congratulations." His genuine enthusiasm warmed me more than yesterday's family drama had chilled me. "Vincent, I need your finest bottles for tonight's retirement celebration." I surveyed his premium section with new eyes. Money was no longer a constraint. It was a tool for creating joy. Price is truly no object. Vincent's eyebrows rose. "My friends supported me for 30 years. They deserve champagne that costs more than most cars. 2 cases of Dom Ringo, 1996. 4 bottles of Chateau Margaux, 1995, he recited, moving with ceremonial care. Vincent loaded my trunk like he was handling crown jewels. $3,000 spent in 20 minutes, and I felt lighter with each purchase. Dell'Acqua Delicatessen overwhelmed my senses. Aged Parmesan, fresh herbs, smoked salmon, arranged like artwork. The owner, Marcel, personally selected each item while recounting stories of famous celebrations he'd catered. Retirement after building an empire, Marcel said, kissing his fingers. This calls for our finest everything. Back home, I found controlled chaos. Susan's catering team had transformed my terrace into something from a magazine spread. White linens draped tables that sparkled with crystal glasses. Soft lighting wound through garden trellises. The sound system played jazz at conversation volume. Mrs. King, we need your approval on the appetizer arrangement. Sarah, Susan's assistant, gestured toward artistic displays of food that looked too beautiful to eat. I tasted everything, crab cakes with subtle spice, chocolate-dipped strawberries that burst with sweetness. Each bite represented years of sacrifice finally paying dividends of pure pleasure. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. My hands stayed busy arranging personal touches Susan's team couldn't provide. Family photos strategically placed where guests could see my journey, from young mother to successful entrepreneur. The sign-in contracts displayed in my study for anyone curious about actual deal terms. Afternoon flew past in a productive blur. Sound system tested, check. Lighting adjusted for golden hour ambiance, check. Bathrooms stocked with premium soap and towels, check. Every detail mattered, because tonight proved that success meant more than money in the bank. At 4 Nook, I stood on my terrace, surveying the transformation. Elegant tables waited for animated conversations. The bar gleamed with premium spirits. Soft music drifted through speakers hidden among flowers. This was what $32 million could buy. Not just financial security, but the power to create beauty, to have demanded $5 million for personal debts. But this demonstrated how wealth should be used, with purpose, with gratitude, with joy. Shared among people who'd earned their place at the table through loyalty and genuine affection. I checked my watch. 3 hours until the first guests arrived. Time for a shower, fresh clothes, and final preparations for the evening that would mark my transition from entrepreneur to gentlewoman of leisure. The contracts sat in their leather portfolio, waiting to be shared with friends who would understand their significance, not as lottery tickets demanding immediate payout, but as proof that dreams pursued with determination could indeed come true. The doorbell's first chime found me adjusting my necklace in the hallway mirror. Deep breath. This was it. The celebration I'd dreamed about for years. Through the frosted glass, I could see Jim and Martha Patterson waiting on the porch. "Bertha!" Jim's bear hug nearly lifted me off my feet. "You magnificent devil! I still can't believe you pulled off that sale." Martha's warm smile carried 30 years of friendship. "The house looks absolutely stunning. You've outdone yourself." Leading them through my transformed home felt like showing off a masterpiece. The terrace drew gasps of appreciation, candlelight dancing on crystal, flowers perfuming the evening air, jazz floating from hidden speakers. "Vincent's finest champagne demands a proper toast," Jim said. "Later," I announced, gesturing toward the bar where DMP Renewal waited in silver buckets. Within minutes, more cars filled my driveway. Frank Morrison from the bank, still sharp at 72. Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd kept me healthy through countless stressful deals. My neighbors, the Costellas, who'd watched King Technologies grow from garage startup to acquisition target. $32 million, Frank whistled low. "Remember when you couldn't qualify for a $50,000 line of credit?" "You've earned every penny," Sarah added, accepting champagne from the circulating server. Those 18-hour days finally paid dividends. Each arrival brought fresh waves of congratulations. Stories emerged. Late nights when I'd called friends for advice, celebrations of smaller victories along the way, commiserations during lean years when success seemed impossible. The Richardsons from 3 houses down approached with genuine small-town pride. "We always knew you'd make it big, Bertha. You've been such an inspiration to our neighborhood. Our kids still talk about the computer camp you sponsored at their school." Mrs. Richardson added, "You never forgot to give back." That comment stung pleasantly. I had given back, scholarships, community programs, quiet help for families facing hardship. Real generosity based on genuine connection, not demanded handouts from entitled relatives. By 6:30, 28 guests circulated between terrace and garden. Conversations flowed like fine wine: retirement plans, travel dreams, investment strategies. These people understood that wealth carried responsibility along with privilege. The sale timing was brilliant, observed Mike Torres, my former lawyer. Market conditions couldn't have been more favorable. Pure luck, I demurred, though we both knew better. 30 years of careful positioning, strategic partnerships, and calculated risks had created the opportunity luck could favor. Catering staff moved seamlessly through the crowd, ensuring glasses stayed full and appetizer plates constantly replenished. Every detail clicked into place exactly as planned. This was how success should be celebrated, with gratitude, dignity, and people who'd supported the journey. Standing near the garden fountain, watching animated faces glow in candlelight, I felt complete satisfaction. Real friends appreciated effort over entitlement. They celebrated achievement instead of demanding shares. They understood that respect was earned through character, not inherited through DNA. Martha Patterson approached with knowing eyes. "You look happier than I've seen you in years, Bertha." "Retirement suits me already." I raised my glass toward the gathering, surrounded by people who mattered most. The evening's magic was building toward my planned toast, a moment to acknowledge everyone who'd contributed to this success. But first, I wanted to savor this perfect scene: elegant setting, meaningful conversations, genuine affection filling the air like expensive perfume. Then headlights swept across my driveway. A familiar BMW pulled into the last parking space. My hand tightened around the champagne flute as Dennis emerged from the driver's side, followed by Wendy in an elegant black dress. From the back seat came two older figures, her parents dressed respectfully for what they believed was a family celebration. "Excuse me," I murmured to Martha, setting down my glass with careful control. I walked toward my front door as warm laughter and clinking glasses floated behind me. Dennis stood on my porch with practiced humility, Wendy beside him holding a small wrapped box. "Mom," Dennis's voice carried none of yesterday's aggressive demand, "I owe you a massive apology for yesterday's behavior." Homer Thompson stepped forward, silver-haired and dignified in his best suit. "Bertha, congratulations on your well-deserved retirement. Dennis told us about this wonderful celebration." "We're so grateful you included us," Mai added, her grandmotherly warmth immediately genuine. "You've always been generous to our family." But my attention stayed fixed on Dennis. His eyes met mine directly, something that hadn't happened during yesterday's money demand. "I was completely out of line," Dennis admitted. His words seemed rehearsed, but felt sincere. "Your success should be celebrated, not exploited. I've been under tremendous stress with work, but that's no excuse for my behavior toward you." Wendy moved closer, her smile perfectly calibrated. "Bertha, Dennis felt terrible all night about how he spoke to you. We brought a small gift to show our appreciation for including us tonight." The wrapped box felt substantial in my hands. Expensive weight, suggesting thoughtful selection rather than last-minute guilt purchase. "You built something incredible over 30 years, Dennis continued. "I'm proud to be your son, and I should have said that first yesterday instead of—" He gestured helplessly, "instead of what I did say." Standing there in my doorway, surrounded by the sounds of friends celebrating my achievement, I felt the sharp edges of yesterday's hurt begin to soften. Maybe Dennis could separate himself from whatever pressure had driven his desperate demand. Maybe family relationships could survive financial stress. "Thank you for coming." I stepped aside, gesturing them into my transformed home. "The party's just getting started." Homer whistled appreciatively at the elegant setup. "Dennis wasn't exaggerating about your beautiful home. This is magnificent." Leading them toward the terrace, I felt cautious optimism replacing yesterday's disappointment. Perhaps Dennis had spent the night reflecting on his behavior. Perhaps Wendy had counseled patience over immediate gratification. Perhaps tonight could bridge the gap yesterday had torn open. "Bertha, your decorations are absolutely stunning," Wendy said, her compliments seeming genuine as she surveyed candlelit tables and flower arrangements. "What an amazing way to celebrate your achievement." My friends welcomed the family arrivals with typical warmth. Jim Patterson shook hands enthusiastically with Homer, immediately diving into conversation about teaching careers. Martha engaged me in animated discussion about gardening techniques. Everyone, I announced, raising my voice just enough to gather attention. I'd like you to meet my son Dennis and his wife Wendy, plus Wendy's parents, Homer and Mai Thompson. The introduction felt natural, healing some invisible wound from yesterday's confrontation. Dennis moved through introductions with genuine grace, asking thoughtful questions about my friendships and business relationships. No mention of money, no hints about financial expectations, just a son appearing proud of his mother's accomplishments. Your mother's been an inspiration to our entire community, Mrs. Richardson told Dennis warmly. She never forgot to help others, even while building her own success. That sounds exactly like Mom, Dennis replied, glancing my way with what looked like authentic admiration. Wendy positioned herself near the bar, charming the catering staff while offering to help refresh drinks. Her social skills impressed even my most discerning friends. She asked intelligent questions about retirement planning, showed genuine interest in family stories, played the perfect supportive daughter-in-law. We should add chairs for the family, I told Susan's assistant, who quickly arranged additional seating at the main table. The party atmosphere shifted subtly with family inclusion, more complete somehow, as if the celebration had been waiting for these final pieces. Homer's teaching stories entertained the group, and Mai's quiet wisdom complemented more assertive personalities perfectly. Standing back near the garden fountain, I watched this perfect scene unfold. Friends and family mingling naturally, meaningful conversations flowing between generations, my achievements celebrated by everyone who mattered most. This is exactly what I hoped for, I murmured to myself, watching Dennis laugh genuinely at one of Jim's business anecdotes. Maybe yesterday's conflict had been necessary, a clearing of air before true reconciliation. Maybe family bonds were stronger than momentary greed. Leading Dennis and his family toward the main seating area felt like completing a perfect picture. Homer immediately connected with Dr. Chen over shared stories about career transitions, while Mai charmed the Costellas with questions about their rose garden. Mom, you should tell everyone about that European river cruise you're planning. Dennis's enthusiasm seemed genuinely infectious as he helped refresh drinks for nearby guests. The suggestion sparked immediate interest. Jim leaned forward with his characteristic grin. Bertha, you always said you'd see the Scottish Highlands when you retired. First stop after the sale finalizes completely, I confirmed, accepting a fresh glass of wine from Dennis. Scotland, then Ireland, maybe venture into Scandinavia. 30 years of 12-hour days earned you every mile of that adventure, Sarah added warmly. Wendy moved gracefully between guest groups. Her social skills, impressive even to my most discerning friends, shone through as she asked intelligent questions about my business relationships and showed genuine interest in retirement planning discussions. Sarah, Bertha has told us so much about your friendship over the years, Wendy said, settling beside the doctor. Dennis and I feel so grateful to be part of this celebration tonight. Family celebrations are the best kind, Sarah replied. This is exactly how success should be honored, with people who matter most. Dennis caught my eye across the terrace and raised his glass slightly, a son's salute to his mother's achievement. The gesture erased lingering shadows from yesterday's confrontation. Whatever stress had driven his desperate money demand seemed resolved through tonight's genuine reconciliation. I can't believe I almost missed celebrating this incredible accomplishment, Dennis told Jim during a conversation about business strategy. My mother built this company from absolutely nothing. Pure determination and vision. The pride in his voice sounded authentic, not the calculated flattery from yesterday, but real admiration for what I'd achieved. Maybe Wendy had helped him gain perspective on family priorities versus financial pressure. Homer raised his wineglass toward me. Bertha, 35 years teaching showed me what dedication looks like, but building a company from scratch, that's remarkable resilience. The hardest part was believing it would work when everyone said technology consulting was too competitive, I reflected. Persistence pays dividends, but it takes decades to see results. Mai nodded thoughtfully. Wendy always said you were an inspiration, working so hard while raising Dennis alone after Ray passed. The comment touched something deep. These people understood sacrifice in ways Dennis had seemed to forget yesterday. Tonight felt like validation that my choices had been correct. Family and friends recognizing effort over entitlement. This terrace setup is absolutely stunning, Wendy complimented, her eyes scanning the elegant arrangement. You have such sophisticated taste. Everything looks magazine perfect. Susan's catering team deserves the credit, I admitted, though I did insist on personal touches. Family photos, the wine selection, flowers from my mother's favorite shop. Details matter for occasions like this. Wendy nodded. Memories should be beautiful. As twilight deepened, garden lights began twinkling like captured stars. The party reached that perfect rhythm where conversations flowed naturally, laughter punctuated stories, and everyone seemed genuinely content. This was exactly what I envisioned when planning tonight's celebration. Dennis moved between groups effortlessly, sharing stories about my generosity over the years, expressing gratitude for lessons learned during his childhood. The son I remembered from happier times had returned, replacing yesterday's angry stranger. Your mother sponsored computer camps for underprivileged kids every summer, Dennis told the Richardsons. I helped when I was old enough. She never publicized it, just believed technology education could change lives. Such moments reminded me why family reconciliation mattered more than money. Dennis could have been part of this success story all along if he'd chosen patience over immediate gratification. My phone buzzed insistently against my chest. The caller ID showed my attorney's office number, probably final details about Monday's closing procedures. "Excuse me, everyone," I announced, glancing around the perfect party scene. "I need to take this call about some closing details. Please continue enjoying yourselves." Walking through the French doors into my living room, I pressed the phone to my ear while positioning myself by the large window overlooking the terrace. The caller was Harold Peterson, my closing attorney, with last-minute documentation questions. "Bertha, sorry to interrupt your celebration, but the buyer's bank needs confirmation on the wire transfer timing." "Of course, Harold. Monday morning works perfectly for the final transfer." Through the window, I could see my guests continuing their animated conversations. The party flowed beautifully without me. "The documentation has been filed with the state, and the transition team starts Tuesday. Very smooth process overall." Dennis was engaging Jim and Frank in what looked like serious business discussion, his hands gesturing enthusiastically. Even from this distance, I could see the respect on their faces as he spoke about the company's future. "I appreciate you handling these final details personally, Harold. This sale means everything to my retirement plans." Something caught my peripheral vision. Wendy had paused beside the drink table, her back to most of the guests. Her hand moved to her pocket, retrieving something small. "That's excellent news, Harold. My words died as I watched Wendy's movements more closely. She palmed something tiny, a small packet or envelope. While glancing around to ensure no one was watching her, she moved her hand over my wine glass. My breath stopped. A fine powder fell from the packet into my drink. Quick, deliberate, unmistakable. "That's excellent news, Harold. My voice caught in my throat as I watched Wendy's movements with growing horror. She tilted the tiny packet and let a fine powder fall into my wine glass. Quick, deliberate, unmistakable. "Bertha, are you still there?" Harold's voice buzzed in my ear. "Yes, I'm here." My words sounded distant even to myself. Wendy was stirring my wine glass with a cocktail stirrer, dispersing whatever she'd added. "Should we schedule a final call before the wire transfer Monday?" Harold asked. Through the window, I saw Wendy pocket the empty packet and stir, then move away from the table with the same casual grace she'd approached it with. No one else had noticed. The guests remained absorbed in their conversations, completely unaware that someone had just poisoned my drink. "Harold, I'm sorry, but something urgent has come up here." My hand trembled slightly, holding the phone. "Can we finalize everything first thing Monday morning?" "Of course. Enjoy your celebration, Bertha. You've earned it." I hung up slowly, my gaze locked on Wendy as she rejoined the main conversation group. Her smile was bright, natural, almost radiant. She positioned herself where she could observe the drink table while appearing engaged with other guests. My mind raced through the implications, the reconciliation, the apologies, the perfect daughter-in-law performance, all calculated manipulation leading to this moment. They weren't here to celebrate my success. They were here to ensure I didn't live to enjoy it. Dennis seemed genuinely unaware, still engaged in animated conversation with Jim. His reformation appeared authentic, which meant Wendy was operating without his knowledge. She had used his legitimate guilt over yesterday's confrontation as cover for her own deadly plan. The wine glass sat innocently on the table, indistinguishable from any other drink at the party. But I knew what it contained now. One sip would be enough. Whatever poison she'd used was likely fast-acting and designed to mimic a heart attack or stroke. A wealthy 65-year-old woman celebrating with alcohol. Who would question a sudden medical emergency? But Wendy had made one critical mistake. She hadn't realized I was watching. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and prepared to return to the party. The game had changed completely, but I held the advantage now. Wendy thought she was executing a perfect murder. Instead, she had just revealed herself as the enemy I needed to defeat. Stepping back onto the terrace, I maintained the same warm smile I'd worn all evening, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Everything settled with the closing details?" Wendy asked with perfect innocence, her eyes flicking briefly toward the drink table. "Just some final paperwork formalities," I replied smoothly, moving naturally toward my usual position. "Nothing that can't wait until Monday morning." The poison was invisible, odorless, probably tasteless. Professional grade, meant to simulate natural causes. But Wendy had underestimated her target. I hadn't survived 3 decades in competitive business by being careless. "Bertha, shouldn't we have a proper toast to your retirement?" Wendy's suggestion carried subtle urgency. "Everyone's been waiting to officially celebrate your success." Jim nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. This moment deserves champagne and speeches." "This seems like the perfect moment with family and friends together," Wendy pressed, building momentum. "Your wine glass is right there, ready for the toast." She was pushing toward the execution with calculated pressure disguised as party enthusiasm, every word designed to get that glass to my lips quickly. "Excellent idea," I agreed readily, my smile steady. "But first, Dennis and Wendy, could you help me with something in the kitchen? I want to get that special bottle of Dominium we discussed, the 1996 vintage, and the good crystal champagne flutes for the proper ceremony." Dennis straightened with obvious pleasure at being included. "Of course, Mom, you know where everything's stored better than we do." "This will make the toast even more special," I added, making the request sound important, like family involvement in the celebration setup. As they headed inside together, I turned to Homer with practiced casualness. "Homer, how are you adjusting to retirement from teaching? 35 years in education, that's remarkable dedication." Homer's eyes lit with the enthusiasm educators always showed when discussing their careers. "Well, the transition has been fascinating. After 3 decades of September schedules, I'm still adjusting to flexible time." While he spoke, gesturing expressively about retirement challenges, I moved closer to the drink table. Homer's wine glass sat 18 inches from mine. Similar shape, identical red wine, close enough positioning for a quick exchange. "Have you and Mai thought about traveling?" I continued, keeping him engaged while scanning guest positions. Jim was deep in conversation with Frank about market trends. Sarah and Mai discussed gardening. The other guests were naturally absorbed in their own discussions. No one was watching the drink table. "Oh yes, we've been planning a trip to visit national parks," Homer continued enthusiastically. "Yellowstone first, then maybe the Grand Canyon." In one smooth motion, I switched the glasses. Homer's untainted wine moved to my usual position. My poisoned glass shifted to his spot. The exchange took 3 seconds and looked like natural table rearrangement during conversation. "That sounds wonderful. The western parks are spectacular this time of year," I replied, stepping slightly away from the table as Homer continued his story about retirement planning. My pulse gradually steadied as the immediate danger passed. Wendy's poison now waited in Homer's glass instead of mine. The sweet irony of using her own father as an unknowing shield felt perfectly appropriate. Dennis and Wendy emerged from the kitchen carrying the Dominium and crystal flutes, their faces bright with anticipation of the coming celebration. "Everything's ready for the proper toast," Dennis announced, setting the champagne bottle on the table with ceremony. Wendy's gaze immediately moved to the drink table, confirming that my wine glass remained in position. Her satisfied smile revealed complete confidence in her planned success. "Perfect timing," I declared, moving toward my switched glass while watching Wendy's expectant face. "Let's make this toast memorable." She positioned herself to observe my drinking, eager to witness the poison's effects. Her father sat beside his deadly glass, completely unaware that his daughter had just tried to murder her host, using him as an unwitting accomplice. "Everyone, please gather around," I called out, raising the glass that should have killed me. The irony was exquisite. Wendy thought she was watching her victim approach death when she had actually just set up her own father for the fate she'd intended for me. Time for the evening's real entertainment to begin. Everyone gathered expectantly around the elegantly set table, glasses raised in anticipation of my retirement speech. The moment felt perfect. Candlelight dancing on crystal, friends and family united in celebration. the soft evening air carrying the promise of new beginnings. Friends, this truly is the most meaningful evening of my life, I began, standing confidently, commanding attention, while internally preparing for the drama about to unfold. 30 years of building something from nothing, and here I am, surrounded by people who matter. Wendy positioned herself with a clear view of my wineglass, her eyes bright with anticipation. She had no idea her carefully planned murder was about to become her public downfall. Your friendship and support have made this success possible, I continued, scanning faces that had supported me through decades of struggle. Tonight, I want to talk about loyalty, about trust, about what family really means. The shift in my tone caught some attention. Jim raised an eyebrow, sensing something different in my usual speech pattern. I've learned that not everyone who claims to love you actually does. My gaze moved deliberately toward Wendy, whose confident smile faltered slightly. Some people see success and think only of what they can take from it. Dennis leaned forward, confused by the growing tension in what should have been a celebratory moment. The other guests exchanged glances, uncertain where this speech was heading. Unfortunately, not everyone here tonight shares that genuine affection. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle over the silent gathering. In fact, someone at this very table tried to poison me just minutes ago. Shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. Wendy's face went white, her eyes darting between me and the drink table as she tried to process how her plan had gone wrong. "Homer, stop!" I shouted as he raised his wineglass toward his lips. "Don't drink that wine. It contains poison." Homer froze mid-motion, the glass trembling inches from his mouth. Homer froze, his hand trembling as the glass hovered just below his lips. Around the table, guests recoiled in horror, several setting down their own drinks in alarm. "What are you talking about?" Dennis shot up from his seat, his voice cracking with confusion. "Mom, what's going on?" "Wendy," I said, turning to face her directly, my voice sharp and unyielding, "would you like to explain what you put in my wineglass?" "That's absolutely ridiculous," Wendy's voice pitched high, laced with panic. "Why would I poison anyone? This is insane." But her face betrayed everything, the color draining from her cheeks, her hands trembling as she gripped the back of her chair, her eyes darting, calculating escape routes even as her lips formed words of denial. "You looked around to make sure no one was watching," I continued, relentless. "You stirred it in, then pocketed the evidence immediately afterward." Dennis stared at his wife, his jaw slackening with dawning horror. "Wendy, tell her she's wrong. Tell everyone this is some kind of mistake." "Of course it's a mistake," Wendy snapped, but her voice cracked. "Bertha, you must have seen something else. I was just helping with the drinks." Homer still held the poisoned glass, staring at it with dawning realization of how close he'd come to death. Mai clutched his arm, her eyes brimming with tears. "Fine," I said calmly. "Let's settle this scientifically. We'll take that wine to a laboratory for analysis. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize publicly to everyone here. But if I'm right..." I reached for Homer's glass. "This will prove attempted murder. Let me just secure this evidence." "No!" Wendy lunged forward with sudden desperation, her mask of poise cracking into raw panic. She stumbled theatrically, her hand striking the wineglass. Crystal shattered against stone. Red wine bled across the terrace. "Oh no," Wendy gasped, too loudly, too quickly. "I'm so clumsy. I'm so sorry." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Dennis stared at his wife with undisguised suspicion. "How convenient," I said quietly. The broken shards sparkled under the candlelight like evidence scattered by fate itself. Wendy dropped to her knees, making a show of cleaning the mess, but every movement screamed guilt. "That was no accident," I said, standing over her, my voice carrying authority I hadn't felt in years. "You destroyed the evidence because you knew exactly what that laboratory analysis would reveal." "I don't have to listen to these wild accusations." She shot to her feet, her mascara streaked and smudged, her composure gone. "This is ridiculous." Dennis stepped between us, but his voice was shaky, uncertain. "Mom, maybe there's some explanation." "The explanation is simple," I said coldly. "Your wife came here tonight to murder me for my money. She used your genuine attempt at reconciliation as cover for attempted homicide." "That's a lie!" Wendy screamed, her voice ragged with hysteria. "Dennis, are you going to let her talk about me this way?" But Dennis's face was pale, his hands trembling. "The money. Yesterday. You pushed me to ask for it, Wendy. You said we deserved it immediately. You said you needed help with your debts. Wendy froze, her lips parting, as if she could snatch the words back. What debts? Homer asked quietly, his voice low and heavy, disappointment etched into every syllable. Wendy, Mai whispered, tears spilling down her face. What have you done? Jim stepped forward, his lawyer's instincts sharpened like a blade. Bertha, what exactly did you witness? I saw her add powder from a small packet into my wine glass while I was on the phone inside. She stirred it in, looked around to ensure no one noticed, then pocketed the evidence. When I suggested a test, she destroyed the glass. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. The timing of that accident was remarkably convenient. Wendy's eyes darted wildly from face to face. These were the same people who had welcomed her warmly an hour earlier. Now, every gaze burned with suspicion, even disgust. Guess what? I said softly, but every ear strained to catch the words. She thought she was clever enough to get away with it, but she underestimated me. And now, she's underestimated all of you. We don't have to stay here and be insulted, Wendy snapped, her voice shrill, her movements sharp. She snatched her purse from a chair. Dennis, we're leaving. Now. Wendy, wait. Dennis's eyes darted between me and her, torn apart by the weight of truth. Maybe we should explain. There's nothing to explain because I didn't do anything wrong, she shouted, but the brittle edge of desperation clung to every word. Come on, Dennis, we're going home. She stalked toward the house, heels clicking like gunshots against the stone. Dennis followed reluctantly, glancing back at me with an expression of shame and confusion. Mom, I don't know what to say. The truth would be a good start, I replied, not unkindly. Car doors slammed in the driveway. An engine roared, tires squealing as Dennis's BMW disappeared into the night. But Homer and Mai remained, rooted in place, their faces gray with shock. The broken glass crunched under my feet as I approached them. I'm so sorry, Homer whispered, his voice cracking. We had no idea she was capable of something like this. You saved my life tonight, he added, his hand trembling as he reached for mine. This is not your fault, I told him firmly, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. Wendy made her own choices. Mai dabbed her eyes with a tissue, her quiet sobs carrying the heartbreak of a mother. We must have missed something. Some sign she could do such a terrible thing. Evil sometimes wears a perfect mask, Sarah said softly, stepping closer. None of us suspected her true nature until tonight. Jim crouched beside the shattered glass, already sweeping the pieces into a dustpan. Bertha, your quick thinking saved Homer's life. How did you figure it out? Pure chance, I admitted. I was by the window taking a call. I saw her pour something into my drink. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Frank Morrison shook his head in awe. Most people would have panicked. You handled it with incredible composure. Guests slowly returned to their seats, their shock transforming into admiration. The catering staff replaced the broken glasses with swift efficiency, restoring order as best they could. She encouraged that toast, Martha Patterson whispered. She wanted to watch you drink it. But she underestimated Bertha's intelligence, Sarah replied firmly. Homer raised a new glass, his hand steadier now. To Bertha, who proved that good can triumph over evil, even within families. To Bertha, the group echoed, their voices carrying warmth and gratitude. But I lifted my own glass toward Homer and Mai. No, to people who show grace under impossible circumstances. Tonight taught me the difference between the family you're born with and the family you choose. Mai's tears shifted from sorrow to gratitude. We don't deserve your kindness after what our daughter tried to do. Her choices reflect her character, not yours, I replied. You stayed when she ran. You faced the truth when she chose lies. That tells me everything I need to know about your hearts. As the evening carried on, the weight of betrayal slowly gave way to something stronger, unity. Conversations resumed, subdued at first, but gradually warming again as glasses were refilled and plates refreshed. The attempted murder became less of a shadow and more of a story of survival, justice, and quick thinking. Homer, still pale but steadier, shared memories of my generosity over the years. Bertha sponsored those computer camps every summer, he told the other guests, his voice gaining strength with each word. She never wanted credit, just believed technology could change lives. Jim nodded firmly. That's the Bertha we all know. Success never changed her values. Sarah Chen added, Tonight only proves it. Grace under fire, protecting others before herself. By 10 o'clock, the last guests were departing with promises to keep in touch during my retirement. The shock of Wendy's actions had transformed into admiration for how I'd handled the unthinkable. Many guests lingered at the door, squeezing my hands, their eyes saying more than words ever could. You saved a man's life. You saved yourself. Homer and Mai insisted on staying behind to help with the cleanup, their way of making amends for their daughter's sins. I didn't let them lift much, but they folded napkins, cleared glasses, stacked plates with quiet diligence. Their movements carried both shame and gratitude, and I understood. They needed to feel useful, needed to leave behind something positive after the wreckage Wendy had left in her wake. When the last tablecloth was folded and the final dish carried inside, I stood on the terrace with them, surveying the aftermath. Candles flickered low, flowers sagged gently, and the shattered glass from earlier had been swept away. But the memory of it lingered, sharp and undeniable. Justice had been served without courts or lawyers. An innocent man had been spared, and the poisonous ties that had threatened to choke me had been severed cleanly, without regret. I don't know how to thank you, Homer said, his voice rough. You saved my life. You saved us both from losing everything tonight. I laid a hand on his arm. You don't owe me thanks. Wendy made her choice. You made yours by standing with the truth. Mai's eyes brimmed with tears again. We failed her somehow. We must have missed the signs. No, I shook my head gently. You didn't raise her to be this way. Sometimes evil puts on a perfect mask. It fooled me too, until tonight. They exchanged a long, pained glance, then both nodded. As they prepared to leave, Homer pressed my hand in both of his. Bertha, if you'll have us, we'd like to remain in your life. You've shown us more honesty and courage tonight than our daughter ever did. We'd be honored to call you family. Emotion welled in my chest, raw and unexpected. You are family, I whispered. Not because of blood, but because you stayed when it mattered. The drive away was quiet, their taillights vanishing into the night. I stood alone on the terrace, breathing in the cooling air. For the first time in decades, I felt clarity. The $32 million sitting behind contracts in my study no longer felt like the most important achievement of my life. Tonight had shown me that wealth wasn't measured by numbers on a page, but by the people who chose to stand beside me when everything cracked open. Dennis? I wasn't sure where his path would lead now. Shame had carved itself into his face as he left, caught between the wreckage of his wife's lies and the truth he'd refused to see. Maybe someday he would come back to me, not for money, but for the love he had forgotten. Or maybe not. But that would be his choice, not mine. What I knew was this. I no longer owed him my security, my peace, or my future. Inside, I closed the leather portfolio of contracts and locked it away. $32 million was more than freedom. It was proof of every sacrifice. Every night I'd stayed awake alone after Ray's passing. Every morning I'd dragged myself to the office, building something worth protecting. Ray. My chest tightened at the thought of him. If he'd been here tonight, he would have stood beside me, his hand firm in mine as we faced Wendy's betrayal together. But maybe he had been here, in a way. Maybe the strength I'd felt, the clarity to see through the mask and act quickly, had been his gift to me. I lifted one last glass of wine, untouched and safe, to the night sky. To you, Ray, I whispered. To the life we dreamed of. To freedom. To peace. The stars above glittered in quiet agreement. When I finally closed the front door, the house no longer felt haunted by Dennis's anger or Wendy's schemes. It felt like mine again. My sanctuary, my beginning. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new journeys, new faces who valued me for more than money. And I would welcome them freely, knowing now the difference between loyalty and greed, between masks and truth, between those who stayed and those who fled. The broken glass and poisoned wine were gone, swept away. But their lesson would remain with me forever. Sometimes the sharpest betrayals lead to the clearest freedom. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching. Take care, and good luck.